Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Goddess and Wanderlust podcast. I'm your host, Lydia, and today I'm with Margherita Cara. Margherita is from Milan, Italy, and she is our female solo travel expert today and also psychologist. Margherita prioritizes slow, cultural based travel and has backpacked throughout Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Europe. So please give a warm welcome to Margherita. Thank you for being here.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here. So, the
Oh,
first
me too.
question I always ask is what sparked your wanderlust?
Oh, that's a very good question, and I feel like the answer is gonna be super long, but that's kind of the point. So I'm gonna I'm gonna tackle that. I feel like it started really early in my life. Just a passion for like traveling and seeing what's out there. And I remember I was doing like a summer camp, like to study English in like Scotland when I was like 14 or 15. And then I did a semester in Australia during my high school when I was 16. And then I did Erasmus on both my bachelor and my master's, both times in Germany, 6 months the first time and a year the second time. And so I've just always had that like curiosity of like what's out there, like what's going on, and what else can I experience. And after I was done with my studies as a psychologist, I thought to myself, okay, I either take my break now or never, basically, because it's such a long process to become a therapist and everything. And so it was like, if I start the next chapter right away, I'm never going to have, you know, 6 months free or like a whole year free. And so I was like, okay, I have to do it now. And it was supposed to be a 6 month trip. The first one that I did was in Latin America. And I came back after 6 months and I was like, you know what, I kind of need to leave again because the more you see, the more you feel like you have to see. And the more you know what's out there and the more you want to experience. And so, all in all, it's been 2 years. And now I'm kind of settling back in Milan and, continuing my education and everything. But yeah, that desire is definitely still there. So I'm going to need to learn how to incorporate it in my adult life, I guess.
Yes, totally. Well, first of all, huge props to you for pursuing something that requires so much dedication and hard work for something that society deeply needs and is such a rewarding job. So I could tell that you have a lot of passion with this. So I love that for you. What I'm curious, what did you learn from that first travel experience?
Oh, I learned so much. I knew, going into it, I knew it was going to be intense and like life changing and everything. But once I actually went through it and it came back, and I got even more kind of realization of everything that meant for me. One big thing that I learned is, for example, that I'd never really seen myself as someone who's like adventurous or like into like the adrenaline or like someone who's super social. I just had these like almost like limiting beliefs on myself that purely came from myself. Like no one, bullied me or like made me feel bad about myself. It was just kind of like this negative talk coming from like somewhere inside me. Don't know where. Don't ask. um, but then going into this trip, I went through so many experiences that proved me wrong. Like, people can do hard things, and apparently I can do hard things as well. I can be adventurous. I can be seeking the adrenaline. I can make friends, and it's everything was coming way more easily than I thought it would for me. So like one thing that I definitely learned is that kind of some of these bad things that I was thinking about myself were just like not true. Like it was just not factually true. And so like and so that started like a process of like kind of realizing where I was like why I was even thinking those things in the first place and everything. But that's like I feel like that's another chapter. Um, Other things is like I don't know ways that I like to spend my time. Again, I've always seen myself as someone who's like more on the chill side, and like all the previous experiences that I had abroad were more like I'm gonna move somewhere and just stay there for 6 months and have like my base somewhere else. And this was the first time that I was actually moving around so much, and every like 3 4 days I was moving somewhere else, and that means meeting new people and like changing country every 2 3 4 weeks, trying new things, new sports, new hobbies, new everything. And I didn't think I was going to be as comfortable with all these like constant adjustment as I actually turned out to be. And so that was so exciting to find out about myself. I was like, okay, girl, get it. you know? And I feel like that's a common experience with a lot of solo travelers specifically. Because I feel like when you're alone, you're kind of forced to make do with yourself, and like you can all rely on yourself. And of course you're gonna meet people, like of course you're gonna find help if you need it and everything, but every little obstacle that you meet, you know, it's mainly just gonna be you who has to like find a way to overcome it, right? And so I feel like solo traveling has more of this kind of effect on, you know, on the person. And I even think it's even stronger for girls who travel solo, because everything around us is like, are you sure? Like, the world is such a dangerous place. Like, everyone wants to hurt you. Like, oh, that's so, like, you know, that's too much for you. Like, you know, it would even be too much if it was two girls, let's say, traveling together. And if you go alone, people are like, really? Are you going to solo travel to Mexico? Like, are you insane? And then you go, and everyone's friendly and nice, and like, I don't want to romanticize it too much, because there is sketchy places, there is sketchy people, 100%. Like, we know that, that's a fact. But also, you kind of realize that the world is not that bad of a place that everyone seems to make it out to be, you know. And that's also definitely something that helped me, and it was a new realization that I was really happy to have on that first trip, and that really encouraged me to go on other trips after, because I was like, you know, if I survived Colombia solo, then I can probably do Turkey or like Sri Lanka or like whatever.
Yes, so many exclamation points that I have to what you just said, to just the transformative effect that solo travel has, just because you're forced to just be with you and your thoughts. Literally, there's no one there you can like rely on, so you really do have
Yeah.
to trust yourself. So that's beautiful
Yeah,
that you,
truly.
yeah, had so many takeaways from your time solo traveling, and also just not just trust within yourself, but trust in the world to like, I don't know, care for you, like trust in strangers to have like the best intentions. And as female travelers, you're so right. We're taught that the world is in fact out to get us, and it's like not we're not supposed to trust strangers, but actually I completely agree that you learn that people at the end of the day have more positive intentions, I think, than malicious ones.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm curious what you think about like the concept of solo female travel, because I've thought about it. I'm like, why is there such an emphasis on females traveling solo? Like, why is there such a dichotomy between places that solo female travelers can go versus men? I'm like, why is there such a difference? Like, I know, like you said, you don't want to sugarcoat it. There are extra things that women should be aware of that men just don't have to worry about. But
Yeah.
like, I think the differences are less stark than the media kind of proposes it to be. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. If there should be such a like an emphasis on solo female traveler versus solo travel in general.
I mean, I think the, probably the main reason why people talk a lot about solo female traveling is that I think around like 80% of solo travelers are female. And that's
Okay.
like the first, you walk into a hostel and you clearly see it. It's mainly girls. And it's, I didn't know, like I had no idea before I went on my own first solo trip. I was like, oh, it's gonna be like couples or like friends or like a group of guy friends or whatever. But it's the majority of them are girls. And so I think a lot of people talk about it because it's the most common experience. Like if you go solo, you're statistically probably a girl, which is super cool on one hand. And on the other hand, I agree that there's this dichotomy that is a bit too emphasized, because I mean, by now we know it. Anything the guys can do, we can do, right? So
Yes,
why are we
exactly.
yeah, why are we talking about it so much? Like, we don't have to make it a thing, right? Um, but at the same time, I was just talking about it with a friend the other day. He's currently in Sri Lanka, and he was just telling me like, oh, this local guy just approached me and we started talking, whatever, and he invited me over to a cricket game. Um, and yeah, so I'm probably gonna see him tomorrow. And I told him like, that's really cool. That's great that you're doing it. But if I was in your place and some guy just approached me, inviting me somewhere, I would have just not even entertained a conversation.
Mm.
Not because I don't want to, but because I'm not going anywhere where some stranger invites me
Mm-hmm.
In their own country that is not mine, if I'm alone. And so I also feel this contrast between like, oh, it shouldn't be that emphasized, like we should just be talking about solo traveling, like what's the big deal, like we're all doing the same thing. But also we definitely need to give extra care and extra attention to certain things, because if a guy from, again in this case it was Sri Lanka, if a guy from Sri Lanka invites some other guy to a cricket game, then he's just invited him to a cricket game and it's probably going to be fun and nice. But if a guy is inviting me to a cricket game, like is he actually, or like is he,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I can fully trust like a random stranger in this sense when they, for example, invite me over somewhere. So I feel like there is no difference, but there's also a difference at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's a really, really good point. And you're kind of making me think of, it's good to emphasize solo female traveler. Mostly, maybe just from what you said, it just made me think of like for men, so they could see their privilege, I guess.
Yeah.
And they could understand that they just have it easier. And they just like don't have to think about certain things that we do.
Yeah, that's a great point, because then I was mentioning this to my friend. I was like, oh, that's really cool that you're going. But if I think about that, I wouldn't have probably gone. And he was like, oh yeah, true. And so we were talking about it, that it's such a different experience. Like we both go to the same country, we're both solo, but he probably has the opportunity to hang out with local people more compared to me, just given the same, we both, I don't know, speak English, we're both solo traveling, we're both experienced, but at the same time, like he's probably going to have access to more experiences with local people, for example, or like, I don't know, going somewhere in the night. It has happened sometimes that I had to say no to plans because I was like, oh, maybe I don't have a drive back, or like something like that. And that's not a problem for most guys who travel. But at the same time, I was thinking that this emphasis on like female solo travel could also be positive, because it does encourage girls to see like, if they can do it, then I can do it. I was also really scared a few years ago. I was like, what am I even doing? Like, why am I flying to Cuba by myself? Like, what the hell? I really wanted to do it, but I was also really scared. And so when I was on Instagram, like stalking all these like Insta solo travel girls, I was like, well, look, if she can do it, like, she recommends some safety precautions. She recommends like the hostels that she found comfortable or that she felt safe in. She advises to go out with a group at night or whatever. So there's people who've done it and people who figured out like the protocol kind of. And so if they can do it, I mean, I probably can do it too. And the only way to find out is to go and see for yourself. But there is examples of solo female travelers who are just such an inspiration and who were an inspiration for me. And so I think it's probably more good than bad to talk about girls specifically traveling solo.
Yeah, that's so true. It could be an empowering term, which is something I kind of didn't think about. And then
it's like, look, come on, like we are the ones who are like, oh, are you sure? Like, are you gonna be safe? Like, are you not going with your boyfriend or like with your guy friend? And then you see so many people, and you're like, well, they talk about their experience as a girl specifically, so I can relate to them and I can look up to them, and that's really positive for sure.
Yeah. This is why I love interviewing other solo female travelers, to like inspire other females who do want to take that solo trip, but they're maybe all they know is other people who travel with friends or like with significant others or with their parents. It's like, no, like, girl, you could do it.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, 100%.
And so, is there anything you wish you would have known before taking that solo trip, or just general advice to solo female travelers? Maybe just based on the experiences or the places you've traveled to, and like quote unquote unsafe or less safe places.
Yeah. So the first tip that I would give to a girl who's like thinking about solo traveling but is not quite sure, I know it sounds very superficial, but like just do it. Literally, there's never going to be, I feel like a lot of people wait for like the perfect moment, or like the moment when they're actually not that scared anymore and like they feel comfortable with the idea, or like the moment where they have enough money and like they have a good enough of a plan and like I don't know, enough savings and stuff. I'm like, just do it. Like anything else, you're gonna figure out later. And I mean it like really deeply, because a lot of people are like, oh, but like not now, like maybe next year, or like oh maybe no, just literally you have to do it now. And I swear everything else you're gonna figure out as you go. That's the best part of it.
Yeah.
To figure stuff out as you go through your own experience with yourself, and like experiencing yourself in different environments and different situations, and as we said, like overcoming things by yourself and like meeting people along the way, like having so many realizations and thoughts about the world, about yourself. That's going to happen when you leave, not before. So I feel like a lot of people are like frozen in the pre-travel stage. They're like, oh, but like I need to have the perfect equipment, I need to like figure out like the whole itineraries day by day, I need to like book stuff. I'm like, no, as long as you have like the visa, you know, a couple nights booked, you got your like medical shots and stuff figured out, anything else you don't need, you know. So that's the first tip, just go. And
Yeah,
I really, again, because
yeah,
I know
yeah.
it sounds pretty like
Because it gets so much
naive.
easier the more you do it. Like
Yeah,
you figure out it's not as scary or as difficult as you made it out to be.
exactly. But you only can figure it out after you've done it for like a month or two, you know, or like even just a few weeks. You're never going to change your mind or be less scared before you even go. So with the first tip that I really want to give out. And another tip that is slightly more practical in terms of keeping safe, and just because you don't want to leave on a trip and like have an accident like a week in and be like, okay, well everything's burned down, or like someone steals your phone like 10 days in and you're like, oh well, that's a bummer. You know, you kind of want to, being safe is the first way to enjoy it and enjoy it long term. And so safety should be like really a priority. And I feel like the thing that worked for me the most out of all the safety tips is just to be aware of like where you are, of your surroundings, of like the people that you have around. Because a lot of these places you have to be extremely careful, specifically in, well, not just in cities actually, just whole areas of certain countries where you have to know that you just don't have to go. Like you must not go. For example, Medellin, Colombia, there's like specific neighborhoods that are safe for tourists, and then if you cross the road, you don't even know, but you're walking into a different neighborhood, and it's a whole other story, and you really don't want to be there. You don't want to be there like taking photos with your phone, like with your camera, or like with a little handbag, like with your passport in it maybe. And so you have to like make it a priority for yourself to be aware of anywhere you should be and shouldn't be. And the way to do it is basically ask around. Specifically, if you're staying in a hostel, you can just ask at reception, be like, oh, look, I like to walk around by myself. Where is it safe to do it, and where is it not safe to do it? Or I feel like every country has a specific website for like safety precautions for travelers. I'm from Italy. I know Italy has one, but I'm sure again each country has one, and so you can go and see the most recent news, because we're not up to date with like the world news constantly at all times. Like that would be overwhelming and also pretty useless. For example, when I was traveling from Colombia to Ecuador, I went on this website, and it said that the southern part of Colombia was like a hotspot for like narco traffic related violence. And so I was going to cross the border by bus, take an overnight bus. And I was like, nope, I'm going to fly, you know? And I don't know if anything would have happened if I'd taken that night bus, you know, probably nothing, maybe something, but you really don't even want to be in that situation in the first place. Or like when I was in Ecuador, it was also like not the quietest month, let's say, for Ecuador. And so I was gonna go somewhere, and I mentioned it to someone in the hostel, and they were like, "Oh, but haven't you heard about the shootings?" And I was like, "What shootings?" And it turned out like a few days before, a shooting had happened in a restaurant in this town that I was going to, which was a popular tourist destination. And so by talking to other people and like listening to their feedback, or like, oh, I've just been there, it's a bit sketchy, or like, oh, I've been there, it's totally fine. Or asking at reception in hostels, or Googling it, you know, because we have so many means that we can to find information now. So the first and literally the best tip is just to be aware of like stuff that is going on around you, because a lot of the stories that you hear about bad stuff happening, I'm obviously, I'm not victim blaming. Like, if something bad happens to you, it's not your fault. But if it can be avoided, then it should. Or like, people go to South America and they're looking for cheap drugs sometimes. Like, bro, that's the recipe for insuccess. Like, I know, like, it's very appealing, it's so cheap, it's so whatever. But first of all, you're supporting something that is kind of destroying the country that you're visiting. So you're not being a responsible tourist. And second, you're going to put yourself in danger, because that stuff is never safe anywhere. And so if you're trying to, again, be aware and be conscious of everything that's happening in the place that you're visiting, then you can keep yourself safe and also others.
Everything you just said is immensely helpful. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. I've never gone to South America yet, but I really, really want to. So I'll keep what you just said in mind. But kind of just following up on safety, how do you balance protecting yourself, but also allowing yourself to experience fully a destination, um, as far as trusting versus being kind of like on your guard?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it's extremely subjective, because everyone has their own kind of limits that they set for themselves in terms of like, oh, this is safe, this is fun, this is cool, and like, oh no, this is like past the limit, right? And for me, I feel like I'm way more on the cautious side, just like as a person. um, and so I feel like I've fully experienced those countries that I've visited, but I know that if I asked someone else who has different limits, they would be like, oh, you didn't do anything, you know? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's very subjective for me. Um, Following up on the awareness theme is kind of like, you never want to be clueless, and you never want to be drunk past your limit, that you don't know what's going on, you don't know who you're talking to, you don't know who you're going back home with, like, you don't want to be there.
Yeah, no.
Again, drugs is kind of like, I mean, I would say it's kind of obvious, but then a lot of people, maybe on the younger side, don't really take it that seriously, and they only see the fun part of it. But as like, I know there's the risk to sound like a granny, but like, just don't do it. I feel like you can have the best night with having like a couple beers, like a few drinks, whatever. You don't need to take it to the extreme just because you're abroad, you know? So I feel like, yeah, the safety tip is always kind of the same one, even in terms of like having a fun night out. If you don't drink too much, if you don't take anything from people that you don't know, like if you don't come back home alone, which I wouldn't do in my hometown in Italy, by the way. So I feel like a lot of the rules that I apply when I travel are the same as I apply when I'm back home. Um, and yeah, I feel like common sense really goes a long way, because again, sometimes you hear stories and it's like, mate, how did you think that was a good idea? Like, oh yeah, I went somewhere like really secluded with someone that I just met, and we did like this and this, and I'm like, oh, and then I woke up without my passport and without my phone. I'm like, well, that sucks. Like, that really sucks for you. It could have been so easily avoided, and you could have had like such a fun night out with like your hostel mates, doing karaoke or like doing some Colombian drinking game. So I feel like it's very subjective, but I feel like it's very much about just common sense and just knowing how to keep yourself safe. Or like, sorry, last example, a lot of people drive scooters without even basically having a license, or like without having driven one, uh, even back home. And I'm like, Asia is not the best place to learn to drive, because the traffic is so chaotic and the rules are different, and like, you shouldn't drive the scooter for the first time when you're in Canggu, Bali. Like, it's not going to end up well. But I was saying it's very subjective, because to me it's kind of obvious, And then you see like 19-year-olds from like the UK be like, okay, let's drag the scooter. I'm like, okay, have you ever, oh no, but I'll figure it out. And then you see like people going around like mummies, with the bandages and stuff on their knees and like on their arms, and it's like, ah. And then you can't swim for 2 weeks. That sucks, and that's gonna spoil the fun.
Absolutely. It's about common sense as much as it is about intuition. Just, like, if you listen to, like, whatever you call your soul, your heart, like, what is the right thing to do. So
Yeah,
just
yeah. Sometimes it just
trusting,
really
yeah.
like rings a bell, and it's like, okay, this like stinks. Like I'm gonna walk the other way. Totally, yeah. That's really important.
And so, kind of what you said about tourists just kind of having fun, doing whatever they want on trips. It's like it's great, and that's what vacations are for. It's to let loose. But in certain places, especially where tourism or the destination is more like affected by tourists, like you have to be more conscious about your actions, and like you mentioned before, being a responsible tourist. So how do we kind of step out of this like mentality that we're kind of just passing through, we're not really thinking about our actions when we travel? How could we step out of this like consumerist kind of borderline colonialist mindset when traveling, and like deepen our experiences in places?
Yeah, that's something that like triggers me a lot because I've seen so many people that, as you said, just like, oh, I'm just here for a week. Like I don't care. I'm like, well, you're here for a week, and she's there for a week, and he's there for a week. Like we're all collectively spending a lot of time here as tourists. So our combined actions make a huge difference and have a huge impact on this place that we're at right now. And it does, like, there was times where it really bothered me. For example, I don't want to like go back to that, but the drug issue is a huge issue in Colombia, and especially because there are certain tourists that like that's their goal. They go to Colombia for that, and then you go to Medellin and you do the Comuna 13 tour, which is like the old um, kind of like narco gangs neighborhood, and they made it, they kind of got rid of them in a way that it's also problematic, but the result is that now it's a place where you can just walk around. There's like murals on the walls, and you can learn so much about the history and all the violence that happened up until like 20 years ago, like 30 years ago. It's so recent. And then you have a local guide who tells you about like his own childhood in the neighborhood. It's like, oh, I had a little girlfriend, but she was on the wrong side of the neighborhood, so we couldn't meet because maybe we would like get shot. And like you learn all this stuff, and to me, it had like a huge impact on me, on the perception of security in my home country, like how I take it for granted all the time, and it's not the case for many other places. um, and like the importance of going to school and getting an education, which a lot of people couldn't do back then because of this violence and everything, and all the strong impact that this whole narco industry had on the communities who did not want to do anything, like have to do anything with it, but they still had to because they were so powerful that they got dragged in. And so you learn all this stuff, and then on the same night you go out and there's people like chasing exactly what we just learned for the whole day that is harming the community. And that, like, honestly, it really triggered me because I really wanted to like grab them and shake them and be like, mate, did you just listen to what the guy said? Because it's very much still happening. And as I said, like, it's a kind of like a modern day colonialism in this way, because we still go and like exploit the resources and like in a way that harms the local communities, and then we go back home and it's like, oh yeah, Colombia was so much fun. Or like Bali is another great example because of everything, like all the different ways that they're ruining the island to make space for this like luxury tourism or whatever. And then you go there and it's like, oh, they're like scraping the Uluwatu hill, like cliffs, to make room for like these villas and stuff. And they're like, oh my god, that sucks. Like I can see what's the name, those machines like literally destroying the island, like physically just like taking bits down to make room for that. And then you talk to your mates and like, oh yeah, but like someone told me that I could like buy land for cheap here and here. I'm like, it's not difficult to like link the two, right? we have such a strong impact, and some people are just simply blind to it. And again, I don't want to sound harsh, but I feel like it's kind of like the opposite of what we should aim for as travelers. And I feel like, to answer your question, a really good way to do it is to really, again, get informed and be aware and learn and be like really open-minded and receptive towards all the things we learn and hear, and to really engage with the local communities and try to spend time with them, and really to listen to all the stories and everything, and to get their perspective and perception of how tourism is affecting the place that they call home. And I feel like a really great way to do it is by volunteering, which I've done like 4 times now. And it really, it's such a protected environment, but then you stay with the families or whatever, and you teach the kids, like whatever type of volunteer you choose. You get to spend so much time with the people from that place and to see their day-to-day life, which as tourists we barely see, honestly. And that gives you like such a deep insight on, the way they perceive us. In Asia, like you go and they're like, oh, like bule, like white person. I'm like, yeah, I guess like I am a white person, but the way they kind of look when they say it, especially the kids, kind of like with these big eyes, like especially if you go in like kind of hidden communities that are not that touristy. And so you really wonder, like, what do they think about us? You know what I mean? And the way to like close this gap is to like, I don't know, go play with the kids, like play soccer in the street, or like teach them English or something, in a way that allows both of you to like spend time with each other and kind of fix the distorted perception they have of each other. Because probably like the perception that I felt, for example, in Indonesia, is that to them we're just like some like rich person coming from overseas, and like we're so tall and we're so like white and everything. And then you just play with them and it's like, oh, we know the different, like we know the same games, for example. We're like, oh, I can't even drink coconut or something, and they make fun of me, so like I'm not that smart apparently, so it's kind of like, again, filling out this gap. And I feel like it's a great way to get even like emotionally more involved with the place and the people, which hopefully is going to result in a more conscious behavior and actions, which I really, really wish for all of us, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, just being curious about the places you visit. Like, how can I get to know the local community more? How can I bridge the gaps between like what my culture is and their culture, because there's less differences than you may think, like you just said. So that's really
Yeah,
beautiful. And it's also like just about privilege. Like it's a privilege to travel, and we have to use our privilege to help rather than harm the communities that we visit, because it really does
100%.
make a huge difference whether you spend money at a Hilton or a locally owned place, for example. So
Yeah,
just being
yeah,
more mindful.
yeah. That's why I always try to like, um, eat local, like sleep local, like try not to go to like, not Starbucks, but like whatever chain they have on Bali or whatever. Because like, well, I'm spending my money, but I'm not even benefiting any of the people here. So it's
Yeah.
kind of useless.
Yeah, just like asking yourself, who is this supporting? And if it's not
Yeah.
supporting the local community, then like maybe question your behavior.
Yeah, no, for sure, question. No, maybe. No, because like that's a part of it. We always say like, oh, like traveling changed me, and like it opened my mind, and like it made me see so many things. And this is the kind of stuff that you realize when you travel. Because back home, like I don't know, I go to the supermarket and I buy my bananas, and then I go to Central and South America and I realize the awful things that, what's the name, Chiquita, the banana company, whatever.
I think.
Everyone hates them there. They
Hmm.
took like hectares and hectares of like wild forest, cut everything down to make banana plantations. And then I learn about this, like I see all the farmers and the families, like I hear their stories, and then I fly back to Milan. Next time I go to the supermarket, I'm not gonna get the bloody bananas, because I learned something,
Wow.
and that helped me like correct my course of action.
Hmm. I did not know that.
They hate it. It's like you mentioned, like I don't know, some dictator or something.
Wow.
It's a huge thing in many different countries. They basically supply the whole world. They're everywhere. and I didn't know that unless until I went there, and I talked to them, I listened to them, and I physically saw the banana plantations, and I was like, wow, there's a lot. And then you hear about it, and then yeah, no more Chiquita bananas. I mean, it's a sacrifice that I can do. Uh, but yeah, that's just an example of like the things you learn that actually have an impact on your day-to-day life when you're back as well.
Hmm. Well, I'm really glad you shared, so I know now to not buy Chiquita bananas.
Yeah, it's just how could you not, like, we don't know. We don't know about that. Like, living here, like, no one talks about it really. And then
Yeah,
you go and you're like, oops,
yeah,
what can you do?
yeah.
You can
There's
correct like your future actions, but what you've done, you've done.
exactly. There's so much that's just like undercover information. It's like hidden on purpose, and we really have to be the ones to like investigate ourselves. And that's unfortunate because so many people don't like have the means, or they're not like aware enough to pursue that information.
Yeah, it was also the same, for example, with the colonial history of many countries. And you're like, oh yeah, like they became independent, but like they're still like, I don't know, in good relationship, or like they still have this shared cultural heritage or whatever. And then you go to Vietnam, and like if you speak French, they're kind of like, okay, like it's not seen as positive as we think they would see it.
Mm.
That's just an example. Or like in Sri Lanka, like they had a civil war not that long ago, and if you look into it, then it's based like it's a direct consequence of all the different colonial times that they had with different colonizations, and so it's still very much happening. Like there's different ethnicities and groups of people who are still like not at peace, and so the effects of something that seems like it was over a long time ago, it's actually still going. But you learn so many things that I went to school, I got my master's, whatever. I had no idea about a lot of this stuff.
I love all your perspectives and your opinions about this because I fully agree, and more people should be aware of these kind of things. So,
Yeah, I think so too.
but we do have to move into our rapid fire round to kind of close off the
Let's do
segment.
it.
So, the first part of the rapid fire is number one: what is a dream destination for you?
Mm, New Zealand.
Okay, New Zealand. Number
Yeah, there's not any further than I can go. I live in Italy. That's like the furthest. Maybe there's
oh,
some islands like in the Pacific or something that it's even further away, but I love the idea of New Zealand.
okay. Yeah, the nature and beaches are supposed to be incredible.
Yeah, it's so like diverse and so like pristine, and so I've only seen photos obviously, and I just really want to see one day.
Same. And then two, what is a memorable meal you've had when traveling?
Hmm. God, I had so many. I always gain weight when I travel. Maybe. Look, maybe it would have to be these vegan tacos that I had one night in Tulum. They were jackfruit al pastor tacos, which is like with a little bit of pineapple on top, and it's like so earthy and like so cozy, but at the same time so fresh. And because Tulum is such a trendy place, they were doing the vegan equivalent, which again is with jackfruit. Honestly, I'm still thinking about them. It's been almost 2 years. They were so great.
Tulum, even though it's very touristy, it still is, in my opinion, like still authentic when it comes to the food. Like you could find taco stands, you could find really, really amazing Mexican cuisine.
Yeah, so there's like the restaurants, like you sit down and you get like all the stuff, and it's like $50 per person, and then around the corner there's like this taco stand, and it's gonna have the best tacos of your life. So like,
Yes.
yeah, I know where I'm gonna find you.
No, I could definitely relate. As a foodie, I'm like that's one of the main things I do when I travel. So I feel you on like the the gaining weight part.
I mean, you have to like, right? Because you do so much sport and everything, but at the same time you eat like a family of four, like because you want to try everything, and you just need so much energy. Everything is so delicious, and like, yeah, importante, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And then 3, what is a special place in your heart?
Just one.
Is there a certain destination that you felt you most connected with? Is it really hard to choose just one?
It's really hard to choose, but I'll try, and I think I would say Nicaragua, just because so I spent 5 weeks there, and I wasn't even supposed to go. I was gonna skip it because I was like, what's there to do? You know. Again, I was just out of ignorance. I was like, what what is Nicaragua? I can barely point it on a map, right? And then when I was traveling through Mexico and Guatemala, again talking to people, because that's like honestly your best source of information. Everyone was like, you have to go to Nicaragua, like it's so cool there, you can do this and this and this, and you can stay there and there, and you can eat that and that, and you can hike that one volcano, whatever. So I was like, okay, well, literally 20 people told me that I have to go, so I'll have to go, like. And because I was flexible with my plans, then I just made it happen. And it was just such a good month, like. And it's hard to even explain why, but I just felt so comfortable there. Not in a lazy way, because it's definitely not like a comfortable place in the sense of, having actual comforts and like nice place to be, like a warm shower, whatever. There's none of that, but comfortable in a way that I really felt. Somehow I felt like I belonged there, and I was almost feeling like I was at home, and like I was surrounded by friends that I met there, and the nature is gorgeous and beautiful. There's tons to do. I tried to learn to surf there, so I spent a lot of time in a surf camp, which was an amazing experience. Um, there's the markets, like there's so much to do, and I just loved all of it. And I know that the company made like a lot of it, but the country itself has just a great energy, and everyone who goes just loves it. And so maybe that's, yeah, if I had to pick one place, it would probably be it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's so special to find somewhere that feels like home, even though it's not officially your home. Like, that's, I think, a rare thing when you travel. It's like rare to
Yeah.
truly connect with the place. So that's beautiful you found it in Nicaragua.
Yeah, especially because it's so different from home. Like I can't even find one thing that Milan and Nicaragua have in common, honestly. But I don't know. It was really special. Yeah, I want to go back one day.
Okay, and with that, thank you so much for your time, Margarita. I loved our
Oh,
chat.
thank you for having me.
I'll make sure to put all your socials and your travel guides in the about section of this show. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. I love being here, and thanks for a great chat. And I'm really looking forward to like listen to it all over again, and just link it to my friends for their like hunters walk and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I'll let you know when it's published and everything.
Oh yeah, please do.
Thank you so much for listening to the Gotta Case Wanderlust podcast. Again, my name is Lydia, and you can find me on social media in the About section of this podcast. Please rate and review if you found value or insight from this, and I hope to see you in the next episode.